I just did a live stream the other day and someone said if you had like $1 for every HX Stomp that you've helped sell, how much do you think you had? I think I'd have like $10 maybe.
This channel is supported by TrueFire. TrueFire is an online library of lessons from some of my favourite players. There's thousands of lessons on there. You can use the promo code JNC40 to get 40% off of any of their courses.
Maybe there's some of you guys that watch the channel that found out or were encouraged to check out the HX Stomp via my videos. Let other folks know in the comments whether you've found any use in the HX Stomp or whether you moved on. I'd love to know your thoughts. I wanted to do a video today exploring the HX Stomp in 2025 because right now you can get them for £519 at Guitar in the UK, and I thought actually that's gone back to being a pretty reasonable price. There's now more models in the HX Stomp than ever before, so I think the present count is 112 amps, 274 effects, and 87 cabs. The crucial thing though is that I think like recently they just added this Bogner Ecstasy, which is what I was using in the intro, as well as the Fender 1968 Bassman, which I think these sounds are pretty incredible, especially now with the new cabs, which are now fully sort of IR based. A lot of folks, the new cab engine, have found that really works for them a lot better than the stock cabs used to. Potentially even, like for me, I've stopped basically using IRs because it's like, I found actually that the Cali V30 with a Neumann U67, whatever those IRs, work for me really well. If you check out LeonTodd's videos, he's done a few of the HX Stomp and included it in a couple of comparisons with like the Fractal stuff and with the Quad Cortex and with the Tone Master Pro. It is worth bearing in mind that this is like a £519 piece of gear, which I don't know if you've checked out those videos, you probably think actually that stacks up pretty well. And I think that's the thing about the HX Stomp for me, which is like, well, it's kind of got all of the flagship stuff from the Helix, like in terms of effects, in terms of the amps, but they put it into this little smaller piece of gear, which is actually really reasonably priced. And I kind of think about what is there out there at the moment that competes with it. You've got like the Headrush stuff. I think it's confirmed, right, that those come from the Avid 11 rack. They recently bought, is it Revolver? Something like that. So there are some new models in there, and it can now do some capturing stuff, which is still the major blind spot of Line 6, if they have one. If you're wanting to try this capture stuff, then that's kind of the other key competitor. It might be something like the Nano Cortex, which is of course a way different paired back experience in terms of effects, but the ability to run captures and capture your own amps, if that's something that you're looking to do, Tonex or the Nano Cortex might be a good bet. Or potentially, I think there are people out there that are pairing like a Tonex with an HX Stomp. But the main thing really is that I think you've got some really killer effects in here alongside some really killer amp models. And even if you don't love all of the amp models, like there are plenty of people that think some of the older stuff doesn't sound necessarily great, but you've now got updated amp models. They've improved the actual engine. This is prior to the cab engine, but prior to this, they basically increased oversampling, which is a nerdy thing that I can't explain properly, but essentially means that the aliasing performance of the HX Stomp improved over time, which you can actually check. Cliff from Fractal did some graphs on this, and the Helix is basically second best in class after AxeFX for aliasing performance. Now this is kind of the thing that makes things sound more natural or not, because the lower the aliasing performance, basically you start to get, you know, things rippling back through the spectrum past below the Nyquist level. Anyway, and you get like weird digital artifacts. Now that you can move the cab, the mic off of the center of the cone as well, I think you're getting kind of a bit more of a natural response and a bit more like tones that you might dial in the real world if you had some of this stuff in the real world. But I think it's never been easier to get a great tone out of the HX Stomp than now. So I just literally created this preset, just pulled up a couple of things like the Bogner Ecstasy into the Kali V30, and then I was like, right, I'll pull up my delay and reverb, so I just have a dual delay and a glitz reverb, and then I pulled up the Fender Dripman, which is a bass amp but sounds great with a guitar, and just didn't really tweak too much from stock. And I've got one snapshot here for clean, this snapshot was a bit more lead, and then this snapshot here was kind of the Bogner Ecstasy blue channel in class A mode. The level of detail that they've gone into with the modelling, I think, is really top tier now. And you've got things like a first in the modelling world where the Grammatico GSG has kind of like a couple of the channels, because it's a cascading amp, where you've got like 2 amp channels within the same model. So Line 6, I think there's not really a pedal out there, in my opinion, that has got so much better over the years from 2018 to now. The HX Stomp, that it's still £519. I can't really think of too much competitively. Like the Boss GX 100 will run more simultaneous blocks, but the blocks that you've got in there, for instance, if you're interested in the amp modelling, far less variety and far less, you know, tweakable. Not necessarily all of them are based on real world stuff. So for me, I think 2025, and I don't know if there is anything, I obviously wouldn't talk about it if I did, but I simply don't know, that there's going to be anything that really blows this out of the water, that totally surpasses it. Now obviously in 2 weeks time this could be totally null and void. You can imagine that something could come out at NAMM, but I'm not aware of anything. And even so, I just think that these tones really stack up very well with the rest of the modelling space at this point. You know, I've compared it to UAD stuff, I've compared it to Fractal stuff, I've compared it to Neural stuff in the past. It's just, you know, it sounds great. LeonTodd's done the same. I think Leo Gibson has done some things like this as well. If you're considering an HX Stomp, I still think it's a great time to buy, is basically my thoughts. The presets that I made years ago, I pull them up, they sound great, they're still inspiring. You can do crazy things with the HX Stomp, like the Chase Bliss stuff that I've messed around with. But more than that, when you just pull up amp models now and with cabs, they sound pretty good, I think. Let me know your thoughts on that tone in the intro in the comments, as well as if you think an HX Stomp is a good purchase, particularly if you're someone who's like wanting some direct tones, but also wanting some great effects. It seems to be catching on a little bit as well. I noticed that Phil Cox Littlefield, session player in Nashville, actually has an HX Stomp on his board, or an HX Effects. Whereas things like the Line 6 M9, you know, ended up in an M5, ended up on people's boards. I think these have taken a little while longer to actually get there, but they are getting there. And the pitch effect in here, amazing. There's some amazing reverbs in there from folks that used to work at Lexicon, Digitech. I think it's getting better, even though the pace of updates have slowed a little. There's still the updates that came, like that Bogner Ecstasy sounds amazing. Let me know your thoughts. Cheers for stopping by. If you want these presets and all of the others, jump into the Gumroad folder. I think you'll find a couple of things in there that you like. Also, you can pair it with Helix Native, which I think is one of the most underrated plugins maybe ever. Cheers, Line 6. I'd like to work with you on some stuff.